All right. So, welcome everybody to TNM Coaching Unplugged podcast. I am honored and happy today that I have David Papa with me in this lovely show that is accelerating your consciousness, inviting you to think about yourself in a deeper and more profound ways, expanding your viewpoints, especially around leadership and decision making. We have an interesting podcast today. Before we dive into the conversation and the topic, I just want to introduce David. It's my, as I said, honor and pleasure to have him with me today. He is a galactic wizard of tremendous wisdom. He is a wonderful, profound, and deep coach and trainer. I've been blessed enough to collaborate with him for a few years right now in different exciting projects, and I'm always taken by his deep and profound wisdom and knowledge, especially in the fields of spirituality. And today we're going to focus on spirituality and leadership and decision making. So, welcome, David.
Thank you, Zoran. Thank you for that incredible introduction. If all of you don't know, Zoran is a galactic leadership maven. He is one of my mentors, and I learn from him all the time about how to be an excellent leader, the way he runs his company, the way he coaches, the way he teaches all the time, just by modeling the behaviors we need in the world that we're creating and the new world that's to come. So, I feel really privileged to be speaking with you, Zoran. I've learned so much from you all the time, and anything I can absorb from you on this conversation, I'm happy to get it.
Yeah. And this podcast is said to be a conversation between me and you. And the topic of today's conversation is decision making and tapping into your deeper spiritual wisdom and deeper spiritual knowledge, interconnecting yourself to your higher guidance, to your higher self, in order for all of us to make a profound and wonderful decisions and choices at this moment in time. As you know, we all live in a very challenging world right now. The things are changing all the time. It's disruptive. It's for all of us on so many different levels. We're called to the new level of ourselves. And what I'm observing with the leaders that I'm coaching, with people in my life, with my family, it's very challenging to make a right decision for you right now if you only engage using your mind and using the existing tools that we've been taught in different leadership courses, in coaching, and also in our daily life. So today we really want to explore what do we have in our toolbox and what kind of access can we gain to begin aligning ourselves and making decisions and choices by being guided with something bigger than just ourselves.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great topic for right now. There's so much information, and it's almost impossible to tell what's real. It's almost impossible to tell which information is important. So many people that I'm working with right now are struggling with decisions.
Yeah. So when you think about that, David, from your perspective and where you are in your own evolution and your own knowledge and your own wisdom, what would you say it's the way forward in us accessing and tapping into the bigger and higher levels of ourselves to be able to come with the more profound and aligned decision-making process for ourselves, for our organizations, for our life, and so on and so forth?
Well, I think you said it really well. We need to bring in new tools, and we grew up learning, and most of the business world trains us to use a very analytical approach, a very, kind of like statistics, data-driven approach, logical flow charts, estimated value, right? And these tools can serve us in very specific situations, but they really struggle to serve us when the data that we're going into those models is very ambiguous, when the data going into those models is very uncertain, when the data going into those models is changing all the time, when there's so much data that you can't even fit it into those models.
Mm-hmm.
We need to kind of upgrade our tools, and this idea of making decisions from a different place than we're used to is something that has really been one of my life lessons. I mean, I can share that story if you'd like.
Of course, absolutely. That would be great for our audience to hear your story.
I guess this part of the story starts in my mid 20s when I had graduated from university. I was in my first long, serious relationship. I had a relationship, a place to live, and a job that looked great on paper. You know, it was exactly what I had planned for myself with my mind. I should do this because this is going to help me get money, and you know, this is going to, then I can live here, and oh yeah, this is what my girlfriend should look like, and this is what the relationship should be like, you know. I had this mental plan, and I had checked all the boxes on my mental plan. I was working in advertising in a really fun agency. My girlfriend was beautiful, and we were traveling all the time together. I lived in Philadelphia, was exactly where I wanted to live at the time. You know, fun young city, growing, and there was just one problem: is that I was just totally miserable.
Even with a beautiful girlfriend.
Yeah, yeah. I was just every one of those things on my checkbox list that my mind told me this makes sense logically. I was not happy, but I wouldn't even let myself see that because I had so much mentally invested in these decisions. So luckily, things started to fall apart. So the first thing that fell apart was my relationship. And when that ended, I was holding on tight to that thing because my brain said, "No, this is what relationships supposed to look like. This is so good. We love each other. We can't let this go." You know, and I hung on to that for a good like year and a half. It was like really, the last year and a half was like totally like really messed up. And then when it finally ended, I did have that, a little bit of that fear and sadness, but the overwhelming feeling when it ended was freedom, like a release from a burden, like a relief. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't anticipate this feeling at all. Like I thought it was just going to be terrible. I actually feel really good. Like this is a surprise." And then I started looking around to the rest of my life, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this job that
Right.
I'm afraid to lose, and I worked really hard to get, and I think is the right job. Maybe if I let that go, I'll feel even more free." And then so I started to let the job go, and I just decided I was gonna quit, and I didn't know what to do. And then I was like, maybe I don't want to live in Philadelphia. Oh my gosh! Like all of a sudden, every one of my decisions was, I realized all these decisions I had made with my mind were actually didn't serve my happiness. They served something else. You know, they served maybe my ego, maybe what my mom, maybe the rules I had carried with me. You know, maybe they'd served my mental patterns, but they weren't serving my happiness. So that was the first kind of wake up that I had, that my mind doesn't know how to make me happy. And it took me, I mean, it took me a long time after that to really find the way to make decisions that do make me happy. But that was the beginning.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and it's fascinating that you're sharing that this whole breakdown of your success plan of what you really wanted to create for your life using your linear mind was breaking down, but at the same time you were experiencing joy and happiness and elevation of your spirit without you even understanding logically why.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of reminds, in a little bit, when you say it like that, you know, it reminds of the times we're in now. Things are breaking down. You
That's
know,
it.
certain things are breaking down. We're not sure what's going to happen next. You know, our minds are struggling to hold on to old ideas, are struggling to hold on to like, how do we get things back to normal? But maybe there's something else available that can even bring us more elevation, as you said.
Exactly. And that's something else, is something that I would really love us to look into and discuss today, because in the face of uncertainty, when we are desperately holding on to things that we have projected with our linear mind, that this is what we want our life to look like, and this is what being trained and conditioned and modeled and role modeled throughout our life, and this is how the success looks like, this is how the good life looks like, this is how our business looks like. Now it's crumbling and disappearing. And a lot of us, including myself, sometimes, I'm trying desperately to hold on to things by saying, as you said, oh my God, this is what I really want and need. But at the same time, it's dissipating and disappearing and transforming and evolving. So in your story that you shared with us, what really helped you relax into that transformation and make peace with that transformation and also embrace it without struggling and wrestling with it?
I mean, after all those breakdowns, uh, although I felt that it was the right thing, I also had to deal with the the pain of the loss. And I did have a period of really low time. You know, I had a period of depression really. And it was letting myself go to those darker feelings and just kind of surrendering there and asking for help also in those times. I was given guidance that completely shifted the course of my life. You know, I I should also say that I used to be someone growing up that my friends like didn't even want to go shopping with because I used to take a notepad with me to the mall and I would go to every store and I would write down like if I was looking for a pair of pants, I would go to every store and I would write down where the pants were and the price. And like if I liked them, I would make a whole chart of like all the pants in the mall that I was thinking of buying. And then I would like circle back, eliminate some options and find. I mean, it took me like 2 hours to buy a pair of pants. And after like one time, one or two times, my friends joining me, they're like, I'm not going shopping with you ever again.
Ever.
So this I used to be someone who is very, very like I have to make the right decision and I have to figure it out very carefully with my mind. And so when this breakdown happened, it was very difficult for me to to believe that my mind just didn't know the answer. It was like a very kind of like identity breaking experience.
Right.
In that kind of as my identity was shifting and changing, I started to I started to look into some spiritual teachings, and that's really, even though I had practiced meditation and yoga in the past before, that's really when I made it like a staple in my life. And then I started reading books, and there was one book in particular, the first book that was kind of like spiritually focused book that I really dove into and started like a never ending cycle of reading these types of books was called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway
Yeah, I love that.
by Susan Jeffers. Yeah, yeah. It was really, I mean, it was written now 40 years ago or something, but it was like, it's still relevant. And that every page in that book, I was like, oh my gosh, that's how I feel. Oh my gosh, yes, I've seen my thinking like this. Oh my gosh, yes, every single page. And that just sent me on a journey of maybe there's a different way to navigate life than just my linear mind. And I started to experiment in small ways with making decisions, first letting go of the idea of having to get all the information to make a decision, letting go of the idea that I have to make the perfect exact decision, letting go of the idea of what other people are going to think of my decision. And I mean, that's been a years long process, but it started then. And I started to experiment with making decisions from a different part of myself than just my mind. Because in that book and many other books and many teachers I've experienced since then, they all say there are other data sources than your logical mind. Your logical mind is a tiny, like if you imagine yourself as like some bandwidth, some spectrum, your logical mind is like a tiny piece of that spectrum in the middle. So there's a whole other sources of information that you can draw on that's actually data to use for decisions. And I was never brought up learning about those. I never trained in those. Even in business school, I mean, it was all still logically focused decision making. But gradually, I started to leave this way of decision making, experiment more and more with using the other data sources available to me. And I will say that it led me to some really big changes. It led me to switching countries. It led me to other relationships. It led me to getting married, but then also getting divorced. It led me to, total shifts in my career. It led me to saying no to big projects, and my brain said, no, we have to take that project. But my heart was like, no, does not a fit for me. And saying no and feeling the power and freedom of that. So all these other skills that have completely taken my life in a direction I could have never planned, but actually I'm feeling so much better in than I've ever felt before using these different decision-making tools. So
Absolutely. It makes perfect sense. It's also, for me, it's curious that you actually managed to tap into that bigger part of yourself that we are now going to uncover and talk about that has a little bit more wisdom and a little bit more of overarching perspective of one's life. And when you begin trusting that part of yourself and letting go profoundly, then life surprises you. And what I'm hearing from the story, that once when you've done that and you relax into that space, you begin trusting that space by going through the pain and healing and restoration, so to say, and you begin cultivating the relationship between you and that part of you that knows more than your linear mind knows, the life began being surprising.
Like surprising in ways that, you just look back over time after years now of following this, a different part of myself. I look back over time and just think like, oh my goodness, like all the things that I took myself through have so helped my evolution, so helped my development, have so built my skills in ways that I couldn't have even predicted. And this is one of the things that really helped me make this shift. It's coming up now to mention is that I had to let go of the myth of a rational decision.
Right.
So we get brought up thinking that there is such a thing called a rational decision. 40 years of economics until very recently was founded on this idea that humans are rational actors, always operating in their rational best interest. But we know from all the studies of how humans think, decisions are not rational. Our logical mind is really just rationalizing what's something that's happening in our emotional landscape, So you really scientifically can make the argument that there's no such thing as a rational decision. Everything that we think is logically constructed, we've still ignored some information somewhere. We still haven't pulled in some information from somewhere. And what's that filter? It's our emotions, it's what's going on inside. So even the idea of that we can make a purely logical, 1 + 1 = 3 decision. I mean, humans just don't really work like that. They just don't work like that. So if learning that along the way, when I was studying coaching and in business school, that really helped me be like, okay, well, I'm not even gonna, I need to really hone other skills, because what I even thought was logical wasn't even that logical, like all those things that seem practical and logical in that first part of my life, that life I had built in my 20s that I could justify on paper why I did it.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back on it, I realized that so many of those decisions actually came from a fearful part of myself. Fear was motivating that logic. I was trying to do the right thing and get the right life to look good, and to make the right amount of money and get the right amount of status. Those kind of decisions.
Survive and be successful and whatever be taught. Exactly.
Yeah. And that sounds very practical and logical. And most of society says that's a logical thing to do. But if we look underneath that, it's still motivated on some level by a kind of a fear, or an anxiety, or wondering what other people think. So, it's very rare to have an actual logical decision. Humans are predictably irrational, as Dan Ariely says. So once you realize that, it's like, okay, well, what are my decisions? It kind of opens a space like, well, okay, wait, well, what am I really deciding based on? What am how do I actually make a decision that makes me happy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for our audience, I would love to just go one step backwards to go one step forward. Because when I'm talking to people nowadays, one of the important elements that shows up is what you were referring to. It's that fear element. And linking this back to your story, how do we work with ourselves from inside out to allow ourselves to be vulnerable enough to transform that fear, to surrender in that space of moving away from rational decision making to what we've been trained through our education systems to do, into accepting our true nature, which is not rational. And we never make rational decisions. As you said, we always intellectualize our emotional decisions using our mind. But I see that in myself, in others, in people that I'm coaching and playing with, that shift through that fear, it's a very challenging one. So I'm curious a little bit more, what served you in that transformation to relax with that fear, to transform that fear, and to begin trusting that part of yourself that knows more?
Part of it was in that very first book, Feel the Fear and do it anyway. So our our nervous systems try to avoid fear. We're afraid of fear itself. We're afraid to feel fear.
Hmm.
The first step is just really looking at where my decisions came from. Really getting honest with where my decisions came from. And if I wanted to be honest, the jobs I took weren't because they were the pinnacle of my self-actualization and they were the path of my self-actualization. The jobs I took were logical decisions because I was afraid to not have money. We really have to examine our decisions whenever one of the things the language I use now, which I didn't have back then, but the language I use now is kind of when you have a decision in your mind, you think you want to do something, pull it down into your body, pull it down into your nervous system and try to see what's the emotion motivating that decision. Because there is one. There is an emotion attached to a decision we're making. And what is the emotion motivating that decision? Is the fear motivating this decision because I'm afraid of losing something, or I'm trying to get something that I think I need that I can't be without, or because I feel like I have to do it, or someone's gonna reject me, or think I'm wrong, or there's just kind of joy and excitement motivating this decision. So that would be one way to contrast, is kind of pull it down. Is it a heaviness motivating this decision, or is it a lightness motivating this decision? Because in almost every decision, you can find what's the motivating principle behind it. And sometimes, the brain can kind of obfuscate it, like if I'm working with a client and they say, I need to give my direct report feedback about this thing they did wrong. And I say, okay, well, what's motivating that decision?
Hmm.
It's because I want to do really well. I want my team to be really good. And like, okay, so what's the emotion behind that? What if it's not good, or what if it is good? What are you feeling? And well, yeah, I kind of realized that my team, is a reflection of me, and if my team isn't working well, people are going to think I'm a bad leader, and it's like, okay, so do you think that sense of feeling like you're a bad leader is the actual reason you're going to reprimand your direct report, or something else? It's like, oh yeah, no, I'm actually afraid that people are going to think I'm bad. That's why I'm talking to my direct report, so many of our decisions, even in the business world, have these subtle layers of anxiety behind them. So the first step is just being willing to examine, being willing to really look at, where are my decisions coming from? What's the motivating principle behind them? Can I get honest enough to find that? And just the awareness of that, just finding that can help create some shifts.
Yeah, absolutely. Feeling that, and I love the language you're using. What is the motivation? What is the feeling behind that decision? What is the feeling behind that choice? And it requires us to be honest and to be vulnerable. And I think one of the biggest shifts right now that we're seeing in the world is that we all call to the deeper states of vulnerability, when we can claim the space and time to feel what we really feel, instead of being rushed through our lives and not having enough time and space to be in relationship with ourselves on that level. Okay, so that would be a first step. What else
Yeah.
served you? Once when you feel that motivation behind the emotion, you understand what's really happening, what is driving that decision, what will be your next step around that?
Well, I think something you said is really important, which is also giving yourself the space to feel that. So what we're talking about is slowing down, and that's one of, actually, you could say, the gifts of this crazy COVID time that we're in the middle of, is that it has forced a lot of people to slow down.
Right.
And that slowing down can be difficult for some people, because you will start to feel more of what's really going on inside. But that's so important. That's just absolutely integral to finding the decisions that match who you really are, what's really going to make you happy, what's really going to make your business work. We have to slow down. We're just rushing one thing to another, one thing to another. We don't even let ourselves feel anything. So, I mean, right now, what we're talking about is that emotions are another source of data. Besides, when you see emotions as data, that little tiny bandwidth that we make decisions from, now it expands. Now we're using more of ourselves to make decisions. And so emotions are data coming from our subconscious, coming from the deep, like, computer processing that's going on in our nervous system, and And every emotion, one that feels difficult, like fear or guilt, is data. And the emotions that feel really good, joy, excitement, love, also data. And if we use that data, we're much more likely to make a decision from our whole person, from a whole mind decision. So that's just one. I mean, there are more pieces of data that I know we're going to talk about and bring in, but that's just one way to expand a little bit. So giving yourself that time to pause. So one of the things that really helped me is that after all that whole crumbling of life in the 20s, I made a decision. I'm going to go to business school because I want to learn how to operate in business so business can be an impact source for good in the world.
Right.
That was on all my applications. That's why I went to business school. I got there. I studied in business school, concentrated on leadership and social enterprise. These are purpose-driven companies. I studied actually those kind of businesses. And then when I graduated, I decided I only applied to 3 places. All my colleagues were applying to like every consulting firm, every marketing job. I applied to only 3 places. They were all impact-driven businesses, and I got a job in my top choice. And I was there for about 3 years. And after about 3 years, I started to see that oh man, this again was everything I strove for, and it's a lot closer to me being who I really am in the world. But there's something still missing, and I saw that even at a purpose-driven place, many of the same leadership problems still existed. Like people were not being their creative selves. People didn't trust each other. People were questioning the decisions all the time of leadership, and leadership was making decisions not based on the true values of the company. All these things that we see create difficult cultures to work in. And I realized, oh man, this is actually what I want to help fix, but I don't know what to do. I don't know how. But I knew enough at that point that I said, I am not going to rush into a decision. I'm not going to jump into the next decision. I'm going to give myself a pause.
Right.
So what I did was I quit everything. I was in a relationship at that time. I quit it. I was in the US at the time. I left the country. I was at that job. I quit, and I didn't have anything lined up. And I gave myself a minimum of 3 months to do nothing. And this is not something everybody can do, but any little space of nothing is going to really help you make good decisions. Because what I learned in that space is it took me maybe 5 or 6 weeks just for my brain to stop working in an old way.
Yes.
Just for me to start calming down, and thinking like, oh, I have more options than I thought before, So, and then after maybe 2 months, 2.5 months, and basically all I was doing was meditating, yoga. I was volunteering at a spiritual center. So I was learning all kinds of techniques to activate the deeper wisdom inside myself, connect to a larger wisdom that we're all a part of. I was learning these techniques. And then 2.5 months into this, I was sitting there and I saw so clearly a thought I had never had before, which was all these problems in business cultures, they come from that fear-based decision making. And I want to bring love into the business world, because if we just make decisions from love, we're going to change everything. We're going to change the world. And so that was my first, right after that was my first coaching business, which was called Love and Profit. It doesn't exist anymore because I changed, but that was, that changed the course of my life. That pause changed the course of my life and finally put me in touch with the decision that this is really me. This feels so good, And so, I mean, for me, it was a long process to get there, but we can get there more quickly. If I would have had more targeted, advanced help, I think I could have gotten there much more quickly. And I think that's one of the reasons we're talking about this is how do we get there more quickly? Because we need to get there more quickly now. So, but yeah, that's what happened to me. That pause. That pause was hugely valuable. That's why I wanted to tell that story.
And if people do not have space and time to pause for 3 months, and basically in the COVID situation with lockdown, everybody had time to pause, and we still have time to pause. Even if you don't have the space, you're talking about the micro pausing, taking the space to connect to your breath taking the space to slow down, taking the space to feel yourself and then feel the emotions and then make decisions from that space. And I think that's something that we need to integrate as our spiritual practice, because simply we're not taught to do this on a consistent basis. And actually the world around us, as it has been so far, is modeling something completely different, which is rush, 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 fast, 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 fast. And that space of stillness and silence and peace and quiet, to feel yourself, to pause, it's extremely important to feel that emotion of love, and to feel if that emotion of love or feeling of love is really motivating your next choice and next decision. Yeah.
Yeah. We're just in this rush, like, oh, if I just get the next thing, then I'll feel good. If I just get the next thing, then I'll feel good. I got to rush my way into feeling good, and I just don't see how I don't see that works for anybody, you know?
Yeah, spiritual bypassing and shortcutting. I think that we all, due to the technology and our addiction to technology, I would say, and how fast everything is going, we're again trained in the matrix of our life to kind of rush, rush, rush. And one of the most important things that you and I are talking about right now when it comes to this powerful and profound decision-making moments for your life is that feeling your feelings, really getting in touch with yourself. It's one important step going forward. And then the second is slowing down, creating the space and being able to really be in stillness and silence so the new things can emerge from yourself into really a right choice for you at this moment in time. Yeah.
And then where do those things emerge from?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question, because if you cover the emotional part of our of ourselves, and I think when I started coaching, very quickly I understood that coaching mind is easy on a certain level. If you have tools and techniques and practices, you can very quickly come to the level of mastering your mind and focusing in mind and creating space in your mind. And even coaching your ego is also easy. When it comes to emotion, this is where humans struggle. This is where we are all unaware, uneducated. We don't know what to do with this, and we kind of work with the impulses in our body, unpolished nervous system feedback that gets us into the completely different level of managing our emotion. And I think that this whole part of managing your emotions and becoming emotionally intelligent is super important. But the bigger part of that, so it's where this is coming from.
Yeah. And that really excites me, because through the emotional work, you can start to access this other part of you. And this other part of you that we're talking about now, this bigger part of you, it's the part that almost every artist talks about when they say, I didn't paint that painting, it just came through me. You know what I mean? Or Ray Bradbury, one of my favorite sci-fi writers, he was interviewed about his writing and he said, I never wrote any of my stuff. It just wrote through me. You know what I mean? So many artists talk about like, there's something coming through, and decisions can come from that place. Decisions in our life can come from that place. And what we decide to say to our colleagues can come from that place. And what is that place? Well, for me, maybe I'll give you, I'll pass the buck for a second. Ask you.
Go for it. I'll chip on you. You're in the flow. Go for it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that place comes from the belief that, we're not human beings that sometimes have spiritual experience, right? We're spiritual beings, we're energetic beings that are having a human experience. And this is something that I fundamentally believe. And this is something that once anybody has that kind of spiritual experience, they start to realize, oh, wow, yeah, there's something else going on here. And it's not like it's difficult. You just have to investigate in that direction and you will have those experiences because it's our natural way. Famous quote by a French guy, I can't remember his name right now, but this physics is also bearing this out. When physics examines what's the smallest thing of matter, we find out there's nothing there. It's a cloud of energy, and everything at its fundamental level is this cloud of energy that's just shifting in different ways that creates certain atoms, and then those atoms create this physical reality. So, physics is also telling us that everything is energy. We are energy. And can we let ourselves connect with that energetic part of ourselves that is bigger and is kind of like is connected to the this collective energy that we're all a part of. And when you start to do that, you start to have really weird things happen in your life. You start to have these synchronicities. Things just start, things start showing up for you that you were like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. That seemed like it happened. I wasn't even trying for that. This is amazing. You start having experiences in your body that you're like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling something much bigger than I ever felt before. You start to get insights that come from nowhere. You start to have these experiences that these artists talk about of something working through you. And what is that thing working through you? Well, it's the greater intelligence that we're all a part of. It's the greater intelligence that is the real you. It's the part of you beyond your human self. And, someone can be listening to this and say, well, that doesn't exist. It's not proven, so that can't exist. And my question to them would be, well, has acting only as a human, how does that feel? Does that feel good? Acting only as a human, how's that working out for you? Are you happy? Is that right? So if it isn't working out, maybe just try, you have nothing to lose by just exploring in this direction. What does it mean that I have an energy? What does it mean, spirituality, to me? What does it mean to explore what's really in my heart? What does that mean? Nobody has the exact answers, but if you explore, you will find something completely interesting that could blow your mind.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And for me, that's beautiful language there, David. It's because it's about exploration. So when we engage in our spiritual journey or figuring out what is really driving our life and what is really behind these powerful pivotal moments when we make profound decisions based on love that is driving that force, and we tap into that space, it's an exploration of you getting to know you on a deeper level. And once when you get to know you on a deeper level, it's a surprise again. It's an adventure, right? You begin feeling elevated. You begin feeling liberated. You begin feeling that your life becomes a quest of everlasting unfoldment and the journey into unknown. And all of that is powered by positive emotions. So I love that adventure piece of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And you become so much more resilient, because when you tap this part of you that's bigger than your human self, you have you're more resourced. You can more handle whatever comes to you in your life. You have more, your bandwidth has grown more for how you can navigate and make decisions. And I love what you're saying. You start to see your life as this amazing quest, and it takes on a more game-like feel,
Yeah.
This is very, very important to me now, because all the best things that have come in my life in the last several years have come from me following that. And sometimes I talk about it as my higher guidance, or sometimes I talk about it as the guidance coming from my heart. Sometimes I talk about it as my higher self. Sometimes I talk about it as the greater consciousness or presence or just awareness, pure awareness. Many of the spiritual teachers I like the most just take us into a stillness inside. And when we really can feel that stillness inside, it's not like it's not dead. It's not like it's, some flat, weird void. It's like this alive awareness, and it knows things. And all of us have this intelligence inside of us. And so this is really where I would love to go in leadership coaching, and this is really where I already take personal clients in this direction, but I would really love to bring more of this to the corporate world, because when leaders tap into this, some people just call it intuition.
Right.
There are kind of a couple levels of intuition. There's that emotional level of intuition that we talked about. What is my gut telling me? But then there's like this deeper level of intuition. It's like, what is my energy, my heart telling me? What's my, soul, if you like, telling me? And this is also a source of information we have. And imagine what it would look like if leaders in the corporate world, in startups creating new businesses, in companies that employ thousands of people, if leaders made decisions with that deep intelligence, that deep wisdom that comes from inside of their heart, that comes from their deepest form of intelligence. Think of how they could positively impact the lives of the people in their companies. Think of the new ideas they could come up with as they're growing their businesses. I mean, we have an opportunity here with the in the realm of economics and business to work with these amazing shifts that are happening on the planet on a whole nother level, and I think this is where it starts, is individuals making a new type of decision, individuals making decisions from a different part of themselves than the world of the last 200 years has made decisions.
Yes, yes. And for our listeners and for our audience, let's kind of nail it down to one term, because we talked about we talked about connecting to your heart, which is one level of tapping into the deeper intelligence. And I love that terminology, because when you know how to feel your heart, how to connect to your deeper level of self, you are more in relationship with yourself, or with your wisdom. That's one. We talked about connecting to your higher self. We talked about connecting to the expansive intelligence, a life intelligence. So in order to simplify it and get people to really be with us in this exploration and journey, what is the one term that you and I can use? Do we want to talk about connection to the higher self, or connection to the heart, or something else? What comes to you?
This is a great point. I think it makes a lot of sense to help people focus on their heart, because you can have very quickly, even people who have not trained in this, or people who haven't had an experience in this, people can very quickly, with just a little bit of practice, start to feel their heart,
right,
and start to get into their heart. And your heart is the first place of contact with this deeper intelligence that you are.
That's it.
Your whole body is in contact with it, but your heart is the first place we really feel this, and there are very simple exercises that you can do that even people who have never done them before are surprised at the answers. You can have a question in your life that you're really struggling with, and you can just write down at the top of a piece of paper, what does my heart need in this situation? What does my heart want from this situation? And just write the answer, whatever comes. And 90% of the time, that answer is different than what we've been thinking about.
That's it.
And we notice that there's something different happening here. So really the ultimate goal from a physical perspective is connecting the brain and the heart. We're so cut off. We're so living life head up, so pulling our awareness down into the heart and really making that connection in our whole body, and where the information is flowing up and fully from our whole body, and we're making a decision with the feelings that come from everywhere in our body. Now we're working with much more information than just our brain. So I think what you said is a great way for people to start, is to get into your heart. I mean, when you ask somebody, hey, just point to yourself right now. Just point to yourself. Like, nobody goes like this. You know what I mean? Like, people point at their heart. Where do you feel joy? Where do you feel the great things in your life? You feel them in your chest, in your heart. Also, where do you feel heaviness? Where do you feel sadness when something isn't going well? Or where do you feel like a constriction when something doesn't feel good to you? You feel it in your heart area. So I think getting into the heart is actually a great, I really like that you're narrowing it down to that. I think that's a great first way for people to think about it.
Absolutely. And I would love us to talk about exactly how do we do this. But at the same time, when I was coaching some of the leaders who are really living in the space of the head, not because this is what I really want, it's a program, it's a habit. Let's say it like that. All their life, through education system, through their business life, through their relationships, they've been conditioned to live there and to make logical decisions and choices, to use spreadsheets, to use analytical process, to use agile way of leading that delivers results. Absolutely. We don't want to belittle that. We want to say that delivers results on a certain level. But now we're called to the bigger game. And through this COVID transformation, we are called exactly to do what you said. Imagine the organization when the leaders are connected to their hearts and make the decisions from the bigger wisdom, what feels right for themselves, for their employees, for their countries, for their world, for beyond this world into the galaxies and universes. One of the challenging thing that I'm hearing in my conversation is from people is like, and how do I trust my heart? How do I trust that part of me? It's challenging. I really, really mean it. For some people who have not engaged in the practices of spirituality or meditation, of stillness, of breathing, of body work, of whatever we do within the coaching and personal development industry. For us, it's easy to talk about it because we play in that field. But if you imagine somebody who has never done this and knows intuitively this is the right thing to do, right? And tries to do this decision making from the heart space, powered by love behind. But there is this little niggling voice behind who is saying, can I trust this? Can I trust my heart? So how do we get people in that space and what is the process? I know that, David, it doesn't happen overnight. Maybe it does, but I would love us to explore this a little bit more so that people can learn or understand how to trust that part of themselves.
Yeah. Great question. I would love to hear your answer to that. Maybe I'll throw out a few things, but I would love to hear your view on that too.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple ways to get started, I would say. One of them is you need to, the mind needs to be convinced, So start reading about other people who make decisions from the heart. Start reading about the science of the heart. There's actually some really interesting science of the heart out there, and one of the things that astounded me when I first looking into that was, do you know that very often when people get a heart transplant, their whole tastes in music and food change? And when they look into it, it's because of it. Very often they've somehow taken on the preferences of the person whose heart that they got.
Yeah.
A very physical example. Get yourself reading into the science of the heart. For example, we know that our heart has a measurable magnetic field that's many times the strength of our brain. Our heart and that magnetic field changes based on our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And the magnetic and the heart can also sense changes in that magnetic field based on other people's emotions. So all this science is out there, for us to look into. So you can start to look into the science of the heart. And then what I would say is you have to give yourself experiences. I mean, that's going to be the number one source of information that actually creates a shift for somebody, is actual personal experiences of seeing that something different is possible. So what I might recommend is to start with very, very small decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Very small decisions that don't have a lot of stakes involved. Something like, you're gonna walk to work, but maybe your heart, something inside of you feels joy of taking a totally different path today. Just take that path. Just listen to that. Even though your brain says no, but it's longer and we're late and we have to get there quicker. Like, don't listen to that. Just with that small decision that doesn't have many, big stakes, just follow the heart in that one and see what happens. Very often, you'll take that other route. You'll get an idea that, you'll get a new idea. You all of a sudden solve a problem, or maybe you'll meet someone along the way that, like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I met that person. Or, so all these surprising things happen when we follow our heart, but it takes maybe to start with something that isn't big decisions, so that we learn gradually over time. Oh no, there is something very smart about our heart. It can somehow sense what is needed, even when I can't see the logical linear path to that thing. My heart can somehow sense what's needed. So start with the small decisions. And then as a third way to start, I would recommend that if you're interested in this and cultivating this skill, this capacity, which you definitely have, you just need to activate it inside of you. I would say spend some time with other people that are actively doing this. You can go to an event, that's related to this topic. You can go to a retreat that's related to this topic. You can work with a coach related to this topic, So it's feeding the mind with information. Go research it. Go look into it. Don't just, throw it out, say that it doesn't make any sense. Go do some investigation, and then investigate with your experience using small things, and then investigate by exposing yourself to other people who try to live this way. I think those three simple things are a great start.
Start, absolutely. And I would add to that, the simple things of playing in that space and testing yourself with making simple decisions and choices. That's and those three steps really work well. What I would love to add to this, it's also for you to remember when you were making important decisions and choices in your life that really define your life. I'm talking about the, right relationship, moving to the different countries, changing your life completely. Something that really has a significant impact to the direction of your life. Try to kind of connect to that decision-making process, even from the past, and see where did that decision come from, if that was a positive force in your life. If you made a choice that really empowered your life in the right decision, where did that come from? When I coach people and I get into this technique of remembering and looking back into this, usually that was the moment when they followed their heart. They would say, against all odds, against what everybody else told me, my mother, my father, my environment, my school, my colleagues, my friends, my girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever, they told me go there, and it makes perfect sense. And I was just about to go there, but then I stopped and I followed my heart and I connected to that space, and look what happened.
Yeah, that's a great point.
When we're courageous enough, to explore that and to remember, you will find those moments in your life, and that will be a very empowering space to begin cultivating that relationship with your heart, but also trusting it. Because I think once when we relax into that space of trusting that intelligence, as you define it, as an access point to the bigger vision, or bigger wisdom, then you act from that space in such an empowered way, and empowered presence, that you relax into it, and then your mind follows. Your mind executes. So your mind begins the servant to your heart. Your heart is leading the way. Your heart is saying, Zoran, David, this way. This is the chosen path for you. Trust me, follow me. I have bigger picture. I can see it from a bigger perspective of the wisdom of your life. And even though this doesn't make sense to you and you can't see it right now because what you're seeing is just this, engage into adventure. And then your mind will be an executor, so to say. Then your mind, which is a brilliant tool that we have, and your thinking processes and your beliefs and your strategies will then align to support your heart journey in the right direction. And then you are working or living with this unison, with this coherence, where you are 100% aligned and you feel the internal alignment, and you're following your internal alignment that creates the flow and synchronicities and synchrodestinies and right things appearing in the right time and people showing up and money being part of your journey. All begins to become a little bit more magical, because from my experience, heart creates magic in life. It creates this, this excitement, as you described it before as well. It's like, oh, yeah, man, look at my life. It's so exciting. Even if it's challenging, it's still exciting in a positive and good way. So I think that will be the fourth step for me, to retrace it back, to remember, when did you do it? How did you do it? And then to relax in that space of trust, and then to activate your heart to be your guide in the decision making. Yeah.
I love this. I love that, because what you're making a point is that we've all already had these experiences where there was this other intelligence that we listened to that turned out amazing. It's a really great point. We don't have to, we don't have to look far. Our own life already contains the knowledge that there's something else going on here when we listen to our heart.
Yeah.
Very, very often, as you said, these pivotal moments in the life. One exercise I sometimes do with clients is I get them to write down all their proudest moments of life. All the things in life where they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of that moment. Like that's one I want to remember. Almost all of our most proudest moments are times when we followed our heart as well. Often we were feeling fear, but we followed our heart anyway. And then we were so proud about what happened. We took that risk that our heart was telling us to do, and we're so proud that we did it and what happened. I've never met anyone that said, I followed my heart and I so regret it. I've never had that happen. I've had lots of people say,
yeah,
I had a feeling I shouldn't have done that thing, but I did it anyway because my mind was telling me to do it, and I actually regret doing that. You know what I mean? But I've never heard it the other way.
it's breaking that condition. And, we're talking about, the bigger game here is breaking that conditioning of our mind. So going back into kind of wrapping up this podcast and conversation, when it comes to the leaders in the organizations, and you and I are really passionate about getting the leaders in the space of the heart, connecting them to the wider, bigger intelligence of the heart, making these decisions and choices, especially now with this COVID transformation that will really significantly impact the world and would have a transformational power to evolve, to transform, and to change, how the whole world is run, how our societies are, who we are inside ourselves in the organizations going forward. So what are the words of wisdom or are kind of sharing that, my land well with these leaders to empower them and to support them, to trust themselves enough, to be courageous enough to make those steps?
Yeah. Well, I really like one of the things you said, and I'll just kind of use that. It's like you already have inside of you all the intelligence you'll ever need. The problem is we've made the head, we've kind of put the head on this pedestal. We've basically made a whole decision-making society that bows down to the head, and the logical mind. And what we're saying is life and business completely shifts into this whole other realm when we actually take the head off the pedestal and realize there's a whole other intelligence, and put the heart front and center, and use the mind as the servant of the heart. I love how you said that, because the mind is so good at planning, executing. The mind is so good at navigating the physical world, what's the next step, like step by step. But to see the ultimate destination, to see what really feels good, the mind can't do that. That's where the heart comes in. So put the heart in its rightful place of the source of some of our greatest intelligence. And you already know, you already have experiences from your life where you've seen this happen. So can you just find a little more courage to now use this heart mechanism in bigger and bigger and bigger, gradually bigger decisions, to use it in your business, to use it in your leadership, to use it in where you take your next project, to use it in what you're striving to do and the impact you're trying to make in the world. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to, throw out your everything and to make a big switch overnight. All we're saying is you already know, so just lean into it. Just explore in that direction. Just play with those feelings inside. Just slow down enough, just a little bit, just enough to investigate what's going on in here in the heart space before you make a decision. Investigate your motivations, investigate what your heart is telling you. And then when you find what your heart is telling you, your brain can be that beautiful executor of that decision. And I think that we all know how to do this deep down internally. We all know how to be connected to each other and our deeper wisdom. It's just that we got conditioned out of it, And so it's just it doesn't take, let's say we've been working 30, 40, 50 years, with only our mind. It doesn't take 30, 40, 50 years to reconnect to the heart. It can take just a couple weeks. It can take a few months. It can just take a couple years. It can happen very quickly because it's our more natural way. Human beings were never designed to figure out everything with our logical mind. Our logical mind was like such a small part of us that is such a recent part of also our evolution. We designed and evolved to use our whole selves to navigate this world, to be in touch with what's happening around us. And our heart is the place that we feel that. Our heart is the place that takes in that information from the bigger sphere and lets us translate that. So yeah, that's what I would say. Those are the words of encouragement that I have in this moment. But what about you? You're such an encouraging person, Zoran. What are your words of encouragement?
It's lovely how we are in a unison here, you and I, because what I would love to highlight, just to kind of wrap it up and empower people going forward, is exactly what you said. It's for me, it's about being courageous enough to give yourself permission to play, and to give yourself permission to be different, and to give yourself permission to step up and step away from the conditioning and the boundaries of familiar and what we're used to, into courageous, heroic, adventurous life. And I feel that when you choose to lead, choosing to lead your life, for people who are not in a leadership position in business, or choosing to lead your small business for entrepreneurs and startups, or choosing to lead the organization, it's a choice, right? You have been given the opportunity and you said, yes, I am choosing and I am going to put myself in leadership and managerial position. Therefore, I'm going to show as a way shower, as a leader. There comes responsibility with that as well. And when you love that leadership responsibility and you allow yourself to be fully authentic, and you allow yourself to be a little bit quirky and different, and you allow to lead, because when you lead, you have to lead ahead of the game a little bit. You have to be someone who people don't get. And they was like, wow, what he's talking about? He's talking about decision making from the heart. What is that about? We are used to, Excel sheets and spreadsheets, and this is how we make our strategies, and this is how we make our projection planning. This is what we do. And you have a courageous leader coming and saying, well, guys, what feels right now for us in this situation is this. What is my gut saying right now is that I really have this intuitive hit, and I really feel it, that this is the right way to go. So when you're courageous enough to give yourself permission to show up differently, people love that. This is the leaders that people adore in a good way, not worship you and I'm going to follow you forever and you're my guru. It's not about that. It's about admiration for the courage to be connected to the heart, because we all love it. When we see it in others, when we see it in movies, when we read it in the books, when we connect to your story, when we started the podcast, when you followed your heart, usually people feel this inner butterfly sensation. There's an activation in all of us that happens, and it feels good. And people love that. And then you take full responsibility for your leadership and you show up. And I think that now is the time, and this is the reason why we have this podcast right now. Now is the time more than ever before in the business world and in our lives as well, to take that stage, to lead from the space of the heart, to trust that bigger knowing, to be courageous enough to own that, and to enjoy it and to have fun with it, because this is not heavy. When we talked about getting into the heart and making decisions and choices, this is not responsible. It doesn't feel like, burden. It feels more like an elevated state of the being when you can share yourself in a completely different way. So I would leave our audience with that. And I hope that this was really empowering, and inspirational for them to feel our energy in engaging them and activating them in a space that we really feel and believe we should all go at this moment in time. So I thank you, David, for playing with me today.
Thanks. Zoran, can I say one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of leaders feel quite lonely at the top, and it can feel lonely to stick your neck out and stick your heart out. And, and with this, in this beautiful description, I love how you said it activates the people around you. Like, don't you want the people around you to be activated from their heart space as well? Like, think about all the extra information and energy you're going to get when you activate people by doing, from in their heart, by you following your heart. But what I'm saying is it can feel lonely. So the only final encouragement I would have is you don't have to do this alone. There are other leaders deciding like this. Find them, join a group of them, work with someone who believes in, sees the value of this and can help you guide you in this way. we don't have to do this alone. We're all in this together, and making a big shift away from the way we've known things for a couple hundred years into a new way that we need to take the world forward. We need to lean on each other. We don't need to be all alone. So that's one thing, just one final thing I would say.
Wonderful. Great. We hope you enjoy this podcast and the broadcast as well. We hope that this really empowered you in a wonderful and good ways. We look forward to sharing more. Keep on liking us, sharing us with other people who are like-minded. We keep on being courageous. Thank you so much for being with us today, and bye for now. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Zoran. Thank you, everybody. Bye for now.